What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are finally going to be doing yet another hero guide which you guys have been absolutely begging me for, this time focusing on the main character of the campaign, Iden Versio. Before I explain a few things before we actually get into the video, I'll show you guys on screen what we're going to be going through in this guide. Now, those of you who have been around the channel a while probably know that I used to do these hero guides very regularly here on the channel, but I did start running out of characters to focus on, and the only ones left are arguably my worst heroes, so I have put this series on the back burner quite a bit. With the recent health on kill changes, I've managed to do a little bit better with some of those characters that I don't often play as, and so I thought I'd finally get around to this Iden guide since she's probably the most highly requested of the characters that I haven't actually done yet. Now, before we get into it, there's a good chance that health on kill will actually become passive for all characters in the coming months, and if it does go ahead, then let me know down in the comments if you would like me to redo my hero guides once that does kick into action, as it will change a lot of characters quite a bit. So if you do want to see that, then let me know, or if you'd rather me just focus on other videos, then let me know down below as well. With that out of the way though, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. So we're going to start off with her base stats, and these were tested in arcade, so just bear in mind that there's always a chance that some stats may actually change from arcade to multiplayer. So if you do see any stats that don't seem right, then definitely feel free to let me know down in the comments. So first off, we're going to take a look at her base HP, and she does have pretty much the average health pool for a blaster user, coming in at 650. On top of that, she does have pretty much the average for a blaster user's health regen pool as well, coming in at 200, which was actually up from 150 maybe 2 or 3 months ago now. Her weapon of choice is her TL50, which is definitely an absolute beast of a weapon. It's slightly different than the TL50 for the regular heavy class. Surprisingly, it actually has the exact same stats as the regular version, however the spread works very different with Iden's, plus she has the alternate fire mode, which is a far better version than the heavy's alternate fire. This blaster deals 10 damage to the body at long range and 20 damage to the body up close, and then it deals 19 damage to the head at range and 38 damage to the head up close. Now, those stats are a little bit on the lower side, however the rate of fire really makes up for this, having one of the fastest fire rates in the entire game, and like I mentioned before, the way the spread works is very different than the regular version. Similar to Phasma, as you shoot, the crosshairs actually move into the center of the screen rather than spreading out, and so essentially the more you shoot, the more accurate you will actually be, and with her high rate of fire, this can make her deadly in the right hands. As for that alternate fire, which replaces her ADS button, this deals roughly 75 to 150 damage, dealing the most damage on direct hit or when the splash is within a meter or so of the enemy, and then as the splash gets further away, the damage does of course start to drop off. This alternate fire really makes Iden the beast that she is. She's already great without it, but the fact that she can one-hit kill enemies so easily makes her all that much better. Now, moving on to her abilities, and she actually has a really well-rounded toolset, having a stun, a shield, and a completely new weapon, so she does really cover all bases when it comes to her abilities. Her L1 ability is her trusty stun droid, also known as Dio, which sends Dio out to stun anyone within the area of effect, and this one has a 20-second cooldown, which is actually pretty decent for a stun ability. It does actually deal 40 damage, which I think not a lot of people, myself included, actually take notice of, and the stun lasts roughly 1 second give or take. This ability is just like every other stun in the game. It's really useful for changing the flow of a fight and for dealing with large groups, but at the same time it is really annoying to go up against, and it can definitely be seen as a little bit overpowered, but in saying that, they have slightly nerfed a lot of the stuns in the game to make them just a little bit more balanced. Its only real downside is that the stun length is a little bit shorter than it used to be, plus it's not instant since Dio actually has to go out and find the enemy first, but at the end of the day I'm not even sure I'd really call those weaknesses. Moving on to her L1R1 ability, and this one is her Pulse Cannon. Now this allows her to pull out an entirely new weapon that has no cooldown whatsoever. You can pretty much just alternate between this and your regular TL50 whenever you'd like. It has a strange charge up feature where you have to hold the trigger until the bar on the crosshair reaches all the way to the end before it can actually deal full damage. I tested this to get the actual stats, but the arcade results were definitely not accurate, as I came up with I think 60 damage to the body and 120 to the head, which I know for a fact is wrong. So I don't have the actual stats, but I do know that it one hits all classes to the head and I think all classes to the body except the heavy, however I could actually be wrong on that last part. This ability shines on maps like Hoth or Crate, as without it Iden is mainly suited to close quarters, but with this one equipped she really does become a beast at long range as well. Its only downside is that the bolt speed seems just a tad slower than the regular sniper, so sometimes it can take a little bit of getting used to when you're aiming it, but again I'd barely even call that a weakness anyway. Moving on to the R1 ability, which is her Droid Shield, and this one again uses Dio in order to create a bubble shield protecting Iden from incoming fire, and this one has a very short 10-second cooldown. The shield stays active for roughly 12 seconds, meaning you can pretty much have this shield active for more than half the time you're alive, and this was a really hard one to test, so I'm not actually sure on the proper stats, but it does have somewhere between 700 and 800 HP, so my guess is right in the middle at around 750. This ability is a lifesaver in any situation where you find yourself in a little bit of trouble. Just simply pop the shield and try and run for a bit of cover, and it does also help with the health regen in that same way by allowing you to regen while the shield is active. As for the weaknesses, again, not too sure if this is really too much of a weakness, but it will cancel as soon as you fire your blaster, and it also won't stop sabers from dealing damage or acid from an acid launcher, so those are some things to keep in mind as well. So that is it for all of her base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with her best star cards for Galactic Assault. Obviously, it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards you can use, but these are just the 3 or 4 cards that I think are the most important and most well suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to recommend is called Friend in Battle, and this is her health on kill card. So as you probably all know by now, this awards 20 HP per regular trooper kill and up to 100 HP per hero kill, so this one is definitely a necessity in Galactic Assault. Like I said, passive health on kill is most likely on its way, and so this card might not even exist if you're watching this in a few months, but as of right now it is still a must-have card. The next card I'd recommend using is the Droid Batteries card, and this one pretty much just decreases the recharge time for both the Stun Droid and Droid Shield abilities by up to 25% when fully upgraded. This one kind of speaks for itself. Those abilities are both super useful, and this essentially just means that you can use them much more often throughout the game. The third card I'm going to recommend is called Acquiring Targets, and this one just increases the area of effect of the Stun Droid by up to 40% when fully upgraded. Again, this one is just pretty self-explanatory. Stun Droid can be a lifesaver at times, and so having the larger area of effect can save your life in those situations where you really just need the Stun Droid to take care of your enemies. Now, these 3 cards are the 3 that I personally use most of the time in Galactic Assault. However, I do often switch up that last card that I mentioned for another one, so I will touch on that one as well. The card that I'm talking about is the Alternative Methods card, and this makes it so that you can fire your alternate fire mode more often by up to 25% more. This is a really handy card to use, but in saying that, no one likes an Iden that sits at the back of the map and spams their alternate, but if you are an aggressive player, then this card can really be helpful more often than not. Now again, these are just the cards that I personally think are the most useful. However, she does also have some other pretty handy cards as well, so I'd still recommend to test them all out for yourself and try and figure out which ones suit you the best, although the ones I have mentioned are just a good place to start if you're not too sure what to choose. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Iden on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Camino, Kashyyyk and Yavin 4. Now if I'm going to be honest, Iden can really do well on literally every map in the game since she does so well at both long range and close range, and so the reason I've chosen these 3 maps are pretty much just because these are the maps that I personally do the best with Iden on, but it really is all about personal preference at the end of the day. Moving on to some general tips for Galactic Assault, and the main tip I need to mention is pretty much just in relation to her overall playstyle, as she can be a little bit controversial at times when people just sit back and use her alternate fire mode without really doing much else, as that seems to piss people off a fair bit. Now, for those watching who are highly skilled at Battlefront 2, keep in mind that this guide is almost solely focused on beginners and helping those guys improve, and so I'm kind of going to land right in the middle in that you should never sit at the back using that alternate fire mode in a similar way to Leia's alternate fire. But if you are playing aggressively, then as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing really all that wrong about using that alternate fire mode. You're probably going to see in the gameplay in the background that I do tend to use the alternate fire mode pretty often throughout my games with Iden, although keep a few things in mind. 1, I'm not the greatest Iden player out there, hence why this guide has taken so long, as I just don't use her all that often. And 2, I feel like I play aggressively enough to warrant using it fairly often. When I make these guides, I often do feel conflicted when it comes to giving tips about the best ways to play characters, as let's be honest, a lot of the best ways are also the easiest ways, and personally I just try not to promote playing cheap tactics with characters, as it really can ruin the games for other people. Like I said, I do tend to use that alternate fire mode a little bit with Iden, and honestly feel free to crucify me in the comments for that, as I'm honestly just not good enough with Iden to be able to play the same way as I do with Boba or Han Solo for example. But like I said, if you guys do play aggressively and try and push up and lead your team, then honestly I don't see all that much wrong with using the alternate fire fairly often. Again, I do feel pretty conflicted in regards to essentially telling you guys to use a one-hit kill ability regularly, but at the same time, the reason I make these guides is to try and help you guys do better, and like I said, these tips are mainly for beginners or players with less experience. Now, moving on, something else worth mentioning is to really make the most of all of Iden's abilities, as like I said earlier, she has arguably one of the better toolsets in the game. Her pulse cannon is probably one of the most underrated abilities in the whole game. I often find myself forgetting to use it, but whenever I do use it, I tend to pick up some very easy kills with it, and so the pulse cannon is definitely one that's worth using. Her Droid Shield is also super helpful for those situations where you might often die with another character, as it's almost like a huge 750 HP health buff for the duration that it lasts, as it's next to impossible to die when you're using it unless a saber hero is chasing you or something like that. In any situation where you start to feel a little bit panicked, just press that right ability button and then instantly try and find your surroundings and get to a little bit of cover to gain the upper hand, and more often than not that will allow you to not only survive but then also take care of those enemies that were initially causing you some trouble. Iden can honestly be pretty hard to get used to, but with some practice and some of these tips, I'm sure you guys can go on some absolutely mental kill streaks with her, as like I said, she's definitely a very handy and very deadly character to use. So that's going to be it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some tips for the hero vs villain game mode. So starting off with the best star cards, and honestly I'm just going to mention the same 4 cards that I mentioned for Galactic Assault, as I personally just think that these 4 are her most useful cards. The first card is of course the health on kill card. Now that the target system has been removed, health on kill is pretty helpful for HVV, and so this is a must have card in my opinion. The next card is the Droid Batteries card again, which reduces those recharge times, and again this one is just really self-explanatory. As for the third card, this one is yet again a toss up between the Acquiring Targets card, which increases the stun area of effect, or the Alternative Methods card, which increases the amount that you can use her alternate fire mode. This one really is down to your own playstyle, and so I really can't recommend which one is actually better for you. These are the 3 or 4 cards that I personally use in the hero modes, but again that doesn't mean that these are the only cards to use, and I'd still recommend to try a heap of the cards I didn't mention as well, because at the end of the day they're all useful in their own ways, but these are just a place to start for those who aren't too sure what to choose. Now, moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and honestly I would have to say that Iden is probably one of the better dark side heroes in HVV. Every time I use her I tend to do fairly well compared to some of the other characters, as she just racks up points like there's no tomorrow. There's really not too much to go over in these modes that I haven't already touched on in the Galactic Assault section, but there are some more specific tips that really can help you out in heroes vs villains. The number 1 tip I have is that her alternate fire mode does actually break through blocks and cause damage through the splash damage, and so block spammers are pretty much going to be useless against you if you are playing as Iden. The best thing you can do is pretty much just aim at their feet and quickly spam it, and then they're generally going to start to panic and try and chase you down, dropping their guard, at which point you can just use her regular fire mode to deal even more damage. Another thing that works well with block spammers is to do what I just mentioned and then use her stun when they drop their block, which will leave them extremely open and generally enough to kill them or at least take a whole lot of health. Now the last tip I wanted to touch on, which I've actually made an entire video about, which I'll leave a card to up in the top right, but this is to try and make the most of your rolls to avoid those saber heroes. If you're low on health and need that stun ability to take a bit of the load off but it's still recharging, you can just roll at the right times to avoid those saber swings, use your alternate fire to cause some damage, and then once the stun is available you can use it to take them out completely. Again, similar to the alternate fire, spamming that over and over again is kind of a cheap tactic, and I'd recommend using it as a safety thing rather than your main form of attack, as honestly that's just kind of etiquette. But again, if you are a less experienced player that needs a little bit of an edge to help you out, then be my guest. Now, in terms of some characters to watch out for in these modes, the main 3 that I think can cause an issue are Obi-Wan, Anakin and Finn. Obi-Wan's mind trick really can just ruin your life more often than not. If you get hit by that thing and you're in close proximity of Obi-Wan, then it's most likely going to be lights out. Anakin, well, he's Anakin. Pull, heroic might, some cheeky saber attacks and retribution all crammed into one big combination of fuckery will end anyone, so just even though he is much more balanced than he used to be, just be wary of those ability spammers. As for Finn, really it's just his Deadeye that can cause some trouble, and so he's not too bad, but definitely don't try and trade shots with Finn because I guarantee Finnbot will almost always be accurate than you are with Iden. Even though these 3 are sometimes hard to come up against, as well as some of the others too, so long as you play it smart, stick close by your teammates and make sure to try and deal as much damage as possible, you can definitely do very well as Iden in HVV and Hero Showdown. So that is going to be it for the Iden Versio Hero Guide, guys. Like I said, she definitely is one of the characters that I'm not the greatest with, but objectively she is one of the better all-round characters in the game, so definitely test her out as she's a whole lot of fun to play as. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to leave a like down below. Not only does it help support the channel, but it does also show me that you guys do want to see more of these updated hero guides. Like I mentioned at the start, I'd love to hear what you guys think about me redoing all of these guides once health on kill becomes passive, so let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments section. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 videos or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching, you guys have a great day and I'll catch you all in the next one.